You almost fooled me, fourth dimension. I don't believe there is a fourth dimension, but I do believe there is a fifth. Let me show you why. I'm not trying to solve the dimensional puzzle, but I'm just using this video to show you the clue in dimensional progression that seems to be being overlooked amongst all the chatter that lies about beyond 3 dimensions. I would love for a person with a lot of mathematical and geometric knowledge to use this as the building block in pursuit of what lies beyond a 3rd dimension, if indeed anything at all, and what dimensions beyond 3 actually mean. Current dimensional thinking. Proponents of string theory say that there are 10 dimensions, some say that there are 11. In your everyday search for knowledge on all things beyond 3 dimensions, you will come across shapes such as the tesseract, which is a 4-dimensional cube, and the hypersphere, which is a 4-dimensional sphere. They are structures that are simply imagined from extrapolation from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, and they are simply applying 90 degrees and the number of face rules multiples that took them from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, and then they're extrapolating that to 4 dimensions. I'm not convinced this is correct and that it isn't a flawed thought process. This is how the numbers of dimensions progress. 0 dimensions is a point. 1 dimension is a line in the x-axis. 1 dimension again is a line in the y-axis. 2 dimensions is a square. You're combining the 2 lines. And 3 dimensions is a cube, where you're combining a square and a line. But this is where the 4th dimensional theorists seem to trip up and are blind to the pattern that is forming right before their very eyes. Take a close look. What in nature begins with 0, 1, 1, 2, 3? Of course, the Fibonacci sequence. You start with a 0 and a 1, and the next number becomes the sum of the previous 2. So it proceeds as 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, and all the way to infinity. As you can see, the next number in the sequence is the sum of the 2 before it. And what we can clearly see is that our dimensional world seems to be constructed using dimensionality that follows the Fibonacci sequence. And why wouldn't it? Fibonacci is one of nature's ways. So there would not be a 4th dimension, but there would be a 5th. There isn't a 6th or a 7th, but there is an 8th. This is how I intuit beyond 3 dimensions. This is not fact, nor even theory. Just a gut intuition based upon how I perceive the world to work and looking how things metaphysically work, and also what I see in those first 5 numbers. I believe it's not a straight mathematical extrapolation between dimensions, but it is what the properties of the preceding dimension exert upon the next in the sequence. And I believe it would be able to be described mathematically by some genius out there. So when you combine the effect of 2 dimensions with the effect of 3 dimensions, you add the effect of area to create a uniform constant rate expansion of the 3-dimensional object in all directions. All points in 3 dimensions are in motion, expanding. They may or may not be expanding into 3-dimensional space. The word I can think of best to describe it is presence. If you stop and think about it for a moment, you can kind of feel what that means. Where would a 3-dimensional object expand into? Maybe a constant expansion rate of 3 dimensions is by definition the 5th dimension, and we clearly and obviously can and do perceive it. Maybe an inflating balloon is literally and by definition the 5th dimension, uniform omnidirectional velocity that fills space. Maybe then adding the fifth dimension, constant rate expansion, to the third dimension of volume turns it into an accelerating expansion. And this is the eighth dimension. Maybe that ties in perfectly with my gravity presentation. I don't know, there could be a relationship there. My logic then says that there's 13 dimensions and 21 dimensions. For now though, I'm stopping at 8. Maybe the 99.9999% empty space within the atom is a dimensionality manufacturing plant, where a little bit of energy is thrown in, and of course needed for the motion, and forms our world in ways we cannot easily see. Clearly, I'm not saying that it is, but maybe it's a thinking outside the box question that should try to be answered. I don't know, I think I might be onto something here. Don't try to extrapolate the angles and the faces from 2 dimensions to 3. Instead, combine the effect of the preceding dimension to the next. So it goes point, line, line, circle, sphere, expanding sphere, accelerating expanding sphere, and then the next integral, which would be the jerk, and so on. A good metaphysical parallel to this, the way this next or fifth dimension might work, is let's take person A and person B. Person A is an average Joe. Person B is a famous person. Person A has little impact in the world, but person B expands out into the world. They have a presence. Everyone knows about them. They are part of consciousness or people's consciousness. The three-dimensionality that is them has expanded and is expanded out into consciousness among the human race. Maybe this is why creating things and offering services that make other people's lives better and other people happy are one of the keys to happiness and success and to leaving a legacy. It's that expansion out into other people's lives and their consciousness. Maybe beyond 3 dimensions might not be outside of our perceptions and are what I described above. Maybe the term for what we think is outside our dimension is not another dimension, but another plane, or simply just outside our bubble. Maybe that's something we will never be able to perceive or to ever interact with. Please, mathematicians and philosophers, do your thing in this and give us the math and the metaphysics and the epistemology. The beginning of the Fibonacci sequence is clearly there amongst the sequence of the way dimensions progress. So, in summary, you almost fooled me, fourth dimension, but you didn't. You don't even exist. And to my viewers, I know I have confused you even more about dimensionality, but I've given you a starting point for a new search. Don't think fourth dimension, think Fibonacci dimensions and all that that implies. Thank you.